Hello, welcome back to the United Mates Football Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Keitel, and as always, joining me in LA from back in our hometown of London is my best mate and co-host, Joe. As we typically do, we've got a very special guest on the pod with us. Our guest today has brought their expert football analysis and opinions to audiences around the world and across pretty much every medium for sports media imaginable. A journalist, an award-winning podcaster, a radio and TV presenter, even the voice of the home of football, Wembley Stadium, once upon a time. We welcome Kate Mason to the United Mates Football Podcast. Kate, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. And how are you doing today?
Guys, thank you so much for that intro. How lovely to be here. Yeah, it's really great. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. I had forgotten that we were not all Spurs fans in the room, so we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, we will indeed, Kate. As Kai said, welcome to the podcast. It's always good to have fellow Spurs fans on my side because I'm normally the lone Spurs fan in these conversations. But we will speak about Spurs a bit. I don't at the moment. It's quite depressing speaking about Tottenham. But Kai, just before we get into the podcast, how are you feeling about Arsenal bottling the league? Given the last couple of games, have you conceded yet, or are you still holding out hope?
We've pied it, according to Jamie O'Hara, I guess, but otherwise,
he is the man with the insight. So if he thinks it's over for you, then
that's game over. Yeah, if O'Hara says so.
He's like the Nostradamus of Premier League predictions, I guess. So yeah, no, as you said, the writing's on the wall in that sense. But no, not feeling good. Having said that, a win at the Etihad, and I'll be feeling a lot better. Not confident of that, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, you're
for
right.
football, it would absolutely be better if Arsenal win the league. But
yeah, but who cares about football, Kate? We don't. If just for Spurs fans, that's the only thing I care about this season is Arsenal not winning the league. Now I've kind of mentally switched off from Tottenham. But yeah,
oh my God, it's so tough. There was a bus passing me as I crossed the road earlier. Was doing something quite cool, I thought, which is a partnership between Arsenal women and a makeup brand, which just goes to show, how things have come on for women's football, generally that big brands are doing that. And it was obviously our color is red, which was a really cool slogan and a really cool little branding thing, and passing me on this red bus. And I was just the fucking world is falling in. I'm allowed to swear, aren't I? Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, go for it.
Whatever you want, especially about Arsenal. That's absolutely... Yeah, no, I saw that too. Actually, yeah, no, Arsenal they're doing a lot of good things on and off the field, sadly. But yeah, hopefully their good times will stop soon. But on this podcast, Kate, we always ask our guest an icebreaker question. Typically, we do look through our guest's social media channels and we sort of base it on that. So we have done that today. Nothing crazy, but we like to see what we're coming up with. So we saw that there was a video on one of your social media accounts of basically a dog deflecting in a free kick during a Sunday league game in Chile. So it got us thinking about deflections, basically. So we'll give you some time to answer. Kai will answer first. But speaking of deflections, what's the best or worst excuse you've ever heard in football? So this could be from fans, from players, managers, pundits, you name it. But have a think about that. And Kai, maybe you can give Kate some inspiration with your answer first.
Yeah, do it.
I'm going to be keeping it in-house, Arsenal, and kind of what better way to do that than referencing Arsenal Fan TV, the infamous Ty. Joe, I know you're familiar with Ty. Kate probably might have popped up on your radar as well, but he's kind of the king of excuses.
I've watched him from afar. Yeah, a fellow professional.
Yeah, definitely. You don't the further the better. You want to distance yourself from some of these opinions in particular. I reckon because when we lost 2-1 to Watford at the Emirates a couple seasons back, his excuse was that we mustn't forget that it had been raining that day. Of course, weather only affects one of the two teams that's playing. That day it affected Arsenal. It benefited Watford. So a legitimate excuse in my opinion. But Joe, what do you have?
Yeah, well, the one I've got is an excuse that our friend Keitel, my friend Adam, told me a while ago. And I don't know if this is true, and it's also slandering someone I like, so I do feel bad for saying this one. But back in 2001, Spurs lost 5-3 to Man United. 3.5 at halftime, we lost. Awful game. I was there as a young lad. The first of many disappointments. But Glenn Hoddle allegedly said that going 3-0 up just before half time sort of made the game more difficult for Spurs, which
no way.
I'm hoping it's fake news.
I've heard that as well. That sounds like utter bullshit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm just like, I just can't understand that one. Love Glenn, but yeah, that's a bit of an excuse for me. So that is my one. Kate, have you got anything? Have you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the main most perfect reality thing that I would just like to lay down there first of all is that, of course, if the handball law had been different, we would have won the Champions League. So let's just park that. But I'm actually going to predict an excuse for QPR fans. I've been at QPR quite recently, quite a lot for BBC, and they've had a change of manager. They've been having a bit of a tough season, and Gareth Ainsworth, who's done well in lower divisions, this is a big job for him. He's come in for QPR. Anyway, he likes to try a few different things, and he's a bit of a wacky kind of hippie guy. And I don't know if you saw it, but I think this is a fun and interesting thing that he did. But the club put it out on social media, and that wouldn't necessarily have been my choice. He brought in a guy to teach them all how to do the haka, just after he came in, and QPR already heard from QPR fans in conversation that if they go down, which they might, it's because of the haka.
I have seen that video, and I have seen the blank expressions on the QPR squad's faces as this man I guess
part naked, traditional, like he's a proper guy dressed up for the haka. Maori guy, exactly. And I like, as an idea, I really like all that stuff. I find it really interesting. For the Ramble, we did this interview with a guy, Owen Eastwood, who's really interesting, actually part Maori guy as well, in fact, and he did a lot of work with the England football team, the men in particular, to try and bond them more and move on from the days where they weren't really a football team. They were just a collection of individuals. And he has some really interesting stuff about the haka and about kind of grounding yourself in culture and being related to what's around you and history and bonding things. So I think it's actually quite an inspired idea. It was just the way it was being filmed and stuff. It didn't give them the chance to kind of just go and do this thing that might have been interesting, but it's out there on social media. And you're right, Kai, they look blank and confused and slightly upset.
Well, recently, I think even just maybe yesterday or 2 days ago, there's the video that Arsenal put out on their Twitter of the entire first team squad soullessly signing the mascots.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of just you can, there's the back and forth in the comments about, one side of them being where's the game gone, blah, blah, blah. And then the other side of it, these guys are, at the business end of a title run in, they're, in the zone, et cetera, et cetera. But still questionable on Arsenal's behalf to put that content out, just objectively speaking, just doesn't look great.
I know a lot of people kicking off about it. I think there have been some rebuttal videos that have come out as well that I haven't yet had the chance to watch, sadly. Maybe I'll never get the chance to watch them. But the other thing is it was intercut quite quickly, wasn't it? So the point is they getting through all of the people. So I'm sure there was chat either side of the sign. It's just that they were weirdly doing it like that.
There were a lot of AirPods and earbuds in and things like that. So maybe not too much conversation, but yeah, definitely the editing at the very least.
Slate them. Come on, slate your team. Go, carry on.
Do it.
I've got to refrain slightly, but speaking of that 3-0 lead, I mean, Arsenal, if anyone's proven that old, what the adage of 2-0 lead is the most dangerous lead in football. We've let two of those slip in the last week or so. So maybe Glenn Hoddle, maybe a 3-0 lead's even more dangerous than a 2-0 lead, apparently. At least that day.
There's a lot of insightful stuff, but I don't think that was it. Yeah. I mean, let's not talk loads about Arsenal, but I am quite interested. Do you feel is this a position you expected to be in at all this season?
No, time is an interesting concept at this point, because it's kind of we were doing good, and then we were still doing good, and then we were still doing good, and now we're not doing bad, but we're
City
obviously
doing better. That's the problem.
It's just
You're
City
not doing that bad.
Yeah. So no,
even just this season, at the end of last season, or what, this is madness.
Yeah, the goal would have been for top four, and we pretty much, I don't even know necessarily if that's mathematically happened or not, which must probably happen in the next game or so if it hasn't. But we'll get top four, and at the beginning of the season, I would have taken that. So we'll get top 2, and I definitely would have taken that at the beginning of the season. So yeah, I really sincerely hope we bring it home. It's that type of thing where it's like, will you get a better chance? You know, the rest of the big boys will be back stronger next year, probably. Not including Spurs. Otherwise,
like the
yeah,
Leicester season for us, slightly different, but
yeah, and for us even as well during points of that Leicester season. So yeah, this really feels like the opportunity to do it, but not confident, not confident. Moving away from Arsenal, if anything, in the opposite direction, because we're gonna focus a bit more on you again, Kate. Whenever we have guests on, we kind of like to kick things off on a personal level by kind of figuring out what makes them tick in terms of football, what got them interested in the first place. It's kind of like a superhero origin story, but for like a football fan in their childhood. So taking things way back, Kate, yeah, I say it before it sounds like you got bit by like a radioactive football and turned into, yeah, like a football superhero. But no, what piqued your interests as a child? Was it Tottenham? Was it just football in general? Was it playing the game, watching the game? Yeah, what got you into football?
Great question. It's a strange one actually, because I don't have this big heritage of like, you know, parents having a season ticket and being taken to games the whole time. My family actually lived abroad quite a lot when I was a kid, so there would be sport, just like general sport on, and I think quite often it was a sort of connective thing to England that we would have, you know, like England football games on more, or even like bit of tennis or like Wimbledon, I don't know, things that were going on, and it seemed like sport was quite a big connection to back home for both of my parents. And my dad was nominally a Tottenham fan, but I think astonishingly enough, he was, for our feelings, Joe, he was like a glory Tottenham fan who like took an interest in it when we were briefly really quite successful. And I think sort of hooliganism and all that sort of stuff, he never particularly wanted to go to games. So I think, yeah, when I was very little, I was sort of fascinated, and I liked, you know, kicking things and throwing things and running. You know, I was always interested in sport, and I'm an only child as well, so I would always, both my parents actually would always kind of be running around in the garden, like trying to quite often like games of cricket, pretend games of cricket, or like a bit of commentating as you try and kick a ball not very effectively. And I suppose as well, like in terms of wanting to be in football as a broadcaster now, it's a little bit of like maybe I'm more like the evil guy in the superhero film, because some of it came from the fact that I did want to play football at school, you know, when I was a kid, and not many girls, or maybe they did, but there wasn't a chance to. And so I would like, you know, try and go and play with the boys in the playground, and then subsequently there was like a team I tried to be in, and basically I just got totally rejected. So yeah, I think subsequently that kind of almost made me want to be a part of it more in like a professional way subsequently, because I was like, aha, like this is going to be my world now, you know, I love this thing, I love watching it, you know. As I got older and moved to London, I could take myself to games and get to Tottenham more and more, and then subsequently like the love of Tottenham kind of grew from this kind of slightly low-key thing that my dad mentioned occasionally to like, I don't know, I think even just like Gareth Bale as well, he was part of the like real obsession phase, but before that too. So yeah, it's not a very linear story, but I suppose there's a lot of just like little bits here and there, and beautiful moments in World Cups, and you know, obviously Gaz was there, but I was quite little at that age, so yeah. I'm a nemesis probably in the origin bit of my football story.
Yeah, well, I think it suits us Tottenham fans being the nemesis. A lot of people don't seem to like us much and enjoy our failings. So yeah, that's very, very suitable in many ways. But also, you know, like you said, you did end up working within football. So, you know, there were barriers there when you were younger in terms of you couldn't play with the guys and things like that. You know, it's impressive how you kind of overcame those challenges, I suppose, as a youngster. And now, yeah, very much involved. And yeah, hopefully not the villain anymore. Hopefully more the hero, so to speak.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
But we've got a slightly less kind of serious question now, because obviously you're in the football broadcasting world, well, the wider sporting broadcasting world. So Keitel and I were thinking really about, because there's so many kind of pundits out there, some who are professionals, ex-professionals, some who didn't play the game. But we were thinking, if you could put a five-a-side team together, pundits, so that could be people like yourself, that could be people, I don't know, any type of pundit.
So can I be? Is this my team? I get to be in it.
Yeah,
I'd want to be in it.
Yeah, you can be in it. So Keitel and I mean, we've had a head start because we've created our own five-a-side pundit teams. So we'll give you a bit of time to think about your team. But I'll let Keitel kind of explain his team first and maybe give a few reasons why certain people have made it. So yeah, Kai, I'll hand it over to you and let's see who's made it into your pundit five-a-side team.
I'm going off of the kind of no goalkeeper sort of formation. Yeah. It's like a 2-2-1 that I've put together. I think that's the classic five-a-side formation, surely, or like a 3-2 or something. But the back two is going to consist of a former guest of ours and solid defender, solid guy as well. Exactly, Nato Manoa.
It is. Yeah, great.
He's just going to be patrolling that kind of like right side of defense. I guess that's the one. Now I feel like I'm about to throw shade on Naden, but yeah, maybe the left foot wasn't his strong suit, I don't think, but he'll be our right-sided defender. And then on that left centre back position, Martin Keown. I've got to throw it, keep it in house again with Arsenal. He's a classic hard man, but what I like about Martin Keown compared to some of the other kind of players of his generation is that pundits, ex-players, pundits of this current generation. He's kind of bridged that gap a bit better than the likes of maybe Souness and Keane in terms of just being like full on old school, don't make excuses types of, I think he's got a pretty level head when it comes to his perspective on football. I don't mind Martin Keown's takes. And I think he's aged like a fine wine as well, just from a kind of, he's a bit of a silver fox. We'll leave it there with
I think he would enjoy that as a description of himself.
Yeah, feel free, if you see him, you can pass that along. But getting into the midfield now, I've got a bit of an enforcer, Nigel de Jong. I just think he would actually just be fantastic in five-a-side football. And then also, I think it wasn't that long ago that he might have been live on air with perhaps it was Keys and Gray, and I think Keys maybe was trying to give it a bit, and he sort of wasn't standing for it, which I think probably isn't an easy thing to do especially given that he was maybe like the tertiary guest relative to kind of Keys and Gray being the more like the front men. But
they're big pals though. He is in Qatar the whole time.
Okay,
obviously I lived out there and worked there, so I think probably that came more from a kind of confidence position rather than a real fight, because they're constantly playing golf, those lads.
Okay. Well, he, kind of embodied that on the pitch, just a bit of a terrier and a bit of a no-nonsense midfielder, and with his opinions as well. So we've got Nigel in there. We've got Laura Woods has got to be in there. Again, Arsenal kind of hat is very, very much on. And I just, that she'd turn up for the North London derby because she'd just give 150% on that occasion. Otherwise, with the striker, extremely unpopular opinion in terms of kind of a punditry talent, so to speak. But Michael Owen, objectively, I find him quite humorous to kind of listen to. I'm not really kind of saying that that's an intentional sort of thing on his behalf. But at the end of the day, he's going to be ruthless in front of goal. I think we've all seen the video of him just banging in shots against like children back in his kind of heyday for Liverpool. So he'd take this five-a-side very seriously. And he'd probably score about 10 goals every game. So that's my team and the reasoning behind it. Joe, what do you have?
Yeah, so I've limited myself to two sort of ex-pros. And then I've got three other people from the world of football. So I'll go with the ex-pros first. So I've got Alex Scott in there just because I think she'd be the real engine room of the team. Still has a bit of quality and good, and she strikes me as someone who'd be good at five-a-side. And then accompanying her as an ex-pro, I've got Hal Robson-Carney, who again I think his fitness is still pretty strong, and he has that turmeric company, so he can supply the team with these turmeric shots. So we, making sure the joints are all working well as they should be. So
I've heard that stuff. He thinks it's going to change your life. I didn't change my life. I did like 30 days of it, but
did it work?
Well, I always feel quite cheerful. I don't think.
There we go. You'll make the team happy at least. Then it might not make
the wrong demographic.
I'll tell you what it was. It did taste nice. I didn't expect it to taste that nice. You think?
Yeah.
Turmeric, ginger, don't know, but yeah. So I will say that for it.
Oh, there we go. So there's something going for Hal's his turmeric. So there we go.
Yeah.
But then on the less healthy side, I've actually got Mark Pugach in there. Not because he's an unhealthy person, but because when he came on our podcast, he says he likes to have a kebab. So I think after the football, he'd probably like to go and have a pint and a kebab, which I think is so that's always quite a nice part of playing five-a-side. I certainly do that with the people in my team. And then last, Kate, go ahead.
Me. I feel like I need further kind of analysis to go into this. But obviously, if I'm going to play in this team, I'm interested that you didn't put yourself in your team.
Well, you know what? I've just realised before you jump into your one, I'll say I'm in there as well. But I'm going to have a sixth man in my team, and that's Peter Drury, just because he's going to be on the side commentating. So when I score a good goal, he's going to just describe it in his poetic way. And
yeah, that's such a nice idea. Well, in that case, then you should have like Emma Hayes as like.
She'd be a good coach.
You can have a manager as well.
Yeah. I think
that would be helpful.
Yeah.
The thing is, I see myself as like a striker, but I've kind of, I guess in my formation we've got like one defender, and that's basically me because I think I want to have Souness and Glenn Hoddle. I'm not controlling for age because I suppose I'm thinking kind of prime of these guys. It doesn't work really because obviously it's as now. Because then I've also controlled for age in that then I would put Joby McAnuff up front because he's still quite young. So yeah, this is quite disordered thinking. But anyway, he's scored some great free kicks and it's just like vibes, right? I just think he'd be a great person to have on the team. And then I think maybe Annie Aluko as well, because I'd want to have two girls in the side, right? 2 girls, 4 guys seems reasonable. I'm not sure it's going to be a winning team, but it would have vibes, right?
Vibes
that counts.
Five-a-side, yeah. Five-a-side. Who cares about quality?
Vibes is like the new away goals rule.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, I miss away goals.
I feel pretty team away goals as well. I don't know if that's partly because also Lucas Moura is like last minute. That was an away goals. I feel like away goals have been quite kind to Spurs as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I was also looking at a list. I've forgotten most of the other people, but a list of all the people who've ever been given 10 out of 10 in the the L'Equipe rankings, and they're so stringent and nobody ever does. So I don't know. It's only like 15 people who've ever got them, and obviously it's like Messi and Neymar and blah blah blah. But Lucas Moura got 10 for that.
Oh, so, yeah. Days. Now he was playing in the under-21s on the weekend after. I mean, he got sent off again. Yeah, I think Lucas. He had his moments, but yeah, perhaps it's time to say goodbye to Lucas at Spurs.
That's in the Spurs trophy cabinet, the 10 out of 10 rating for.
Yeah.
Why did we let him talk?
Yeah, the trophy cabinet thing is just I just want to win a trophy. I just want to win a trophy so it all stops. And I can just I don't think I'll even be happy. I'll just be able to sleep easy, finally, knowing that these jokes will stop. But yeah.
The problem is though, I am not to reference my own media like some sort of poncy dickhead, but I wrote I've got this column in the Metro like every other Friday, and I did one on Tottenham quite recently just before they sacked Conte, and God, it's really hard to write 650 words on your club when you obviously know all the backwards and forwards and arguments that you've had with yourself and with other fans. And that whatever you say, people are going to be like, oh, she's an idiot. I can't believe she's not taking into account whatever. So anyway, but my theory was basically that some of the issues we've had recently, and there's all sorts of other issues, of course, but some of the issues we've had recently around the Jose appointment and kind of the Conte appointment, although I sort of believed in it at the time, is from this absolute desperation that everybody has to just win a fucking trophy at all costs.
I think there's something,
and it is, yeah, and then you look up down the road and you see the bloody process going on.
And it makes it worse that we sort of had our own process under Poch, and we
fucked it.
And we had this incredible team, and then it's all.
And we didn't buy a player for 18 months, and obviously there's the stadium situation, but
that's the bit. No, that's the moment it all went wrong when we had the team and we stopped investing. But oh god, we could go down a rabbit hole with this. It's so upsetting. I'm sure Keitel absolutely loves it.
Look at Keitel smiling.
It only took Arsenal
Yeah.
15 years post stadium to get our act together. So You know, that's
Yeah, but
maybe
you've got to win things in the meantime. Like, I wouldn't say no to an FA Cup.
Oh,
no, of course not.
Give me the Carabao, for God's sake. Yeah.
Was that your entire five-a-side sorted?
Yeah, because I included myself, right? So I went Joby and Annie, Souness, Glenn Hoddle, me, Emma Hayes. Although maybe I should have like more of a player manager. I mean, I guess Glenn could be the player manager.
Yeah, he did that job back at Chelsea, didn't he? So he's got history with it. Yeah.
Got previous.
Yeah. So I would.
Three good teams, to be fair, actually, I'd say. Yeah, I didn't put myself in mind, but I would definitely love to play alongside some of those names. Honestly, in all of the teams, I'd be happy. I'd bite your hand off just to play with any of them.
Yeah.
Maybe the opportunity will arise. You know, we'll get Nedham on the line. We'll get, you know, you can ring some of your mates. We'll ring our mates. We'll make it happen.
Amazing. Yeah, I think I definitely agree that Souness would be an important an important guy. And I think he would be fun afterwards as well. Mark Pugac, I was a bit concerned having listened to that episode. He said he was in that specific kebab shop in Newcastle at 4 a.m. So I think we might have to be quite like
it might escalate.
Training.
The after drinks might, I mean, it would have to be after a win, I think, that you let him decide where you go. After, you know, but yeah, who'd have thought it? Mark Pugac absolutely loves kebabs, apparently, which is I'm here for that. Yeah.
Well, from kebabs back to Kate, and yeah, we're gonna move on to some of your own work and accomplishments now. Obviously, you know you've really packed actually quite a lot into your career already, so we're not going to be able to touch upon all of them, but we'll kind of focus on a few of your endeavors. And speaking on Qatar, which is a place that has played quite a big role in your career, I think would have moved there maybe around 2017 to begin working for BA Sports. And then more recently, obviously, you've returned in 2022 for the World Cup as well. So speaking on football culture in Qatar and kind of just like that part of the world in general, did you notice any sort of evolution in terms of maybe the outlook that the region has on football? I'm kind of specifically, talking about the time frame, obviously, that you're familiar with versus kind of having moved there compared to this past year or so.
Interesting question. I mean, I think the thing about Qatar is that I always think is important to remember is that it's such a teeny place that it's hard to, and it's such a small number of Qataris. I mean, there's only a few 100,000 actual native Qataris who live in Qatar or who exist at all, full stop, right? So it's hard to talk about their personal footballing culture because it's just like a tiny little group of people, you know, 50% of whom are women who don't really have that much access to the sport. But in terms of caring about it, I mean, all of the Middle East, you know, you would go down the Corniche, the kind of bit that runs along the water, there'd always be people, because there's so many people who have moved there from all over the world, particularly like the Indian subcontinent and then other parts of the Middle East. You'd always see like kids and people kind of having a kick about. But in terms of the stadiums themselves, I mean, yeah, you know, I was mistaken about a few things in terms of how it would play out. I wasn't sure how it would be in terms of like safety and management of the people there, just because it was the World Cup itself was such a thing that had never, to have that number of people in the country just seemed to me to be like mind-boggling, because whenever I'd been to watch a game of football when I was there from 2017 to 2019, the stadiums are just completely empty. Like they occasionally would have, or quite often they would have like workers, i.e. like construction workers and low wage workers basically might be paid to go and like sit in the stadium and bang a drum and like do chanting, right? But there was no real kind of organic lots of people coming to watch the game of football, and I think partly that's because culturally it's not really it's not really a particularly done thing to get out and about so much in big groups, it feels like, again, in Qatar. I know I'm making big generalizations, but again, it's a very small population. So and when I made this radio documentary about Qatar in the run up to the World Cup, and I think I spoke to much cleverer like academic-y people about it who'd like studied the region, and that was their assessment of it as well. So I think a lot of the football culture idea comes from the fact that Qatar owns PSG as well. There's a lot of people running around in PSG shirts, but you would also see, and this is something quite anathema to people to English football fans really, but people might turn up to work in like a Barcelona top one day and then a Real Madrid shirt the next day, and they would see no real like conundrum in that. So yeah, it was quite confusing to observe.
I guess
Yeah.
given that that Qatar in particular is kind of this larger than life place, considering especially how you mentioned that realistically the population is, you know, minimal and the actual space is minimal, but obviously it's renowned. You know, we see all the incredible skyscrapers and, you know, billions and billions of whatever currency you want to call, like, you know, put it all around the place. Would you say maybe then that the aspect of pride of being able to host, you know, the world's biggest sporting kind of, you know, besides the Olympics perhaps, kind of moment in Qatar, would that superseded kind of like the baseline kind of like emotion around the sport itself? It was just kind of like a proud moment for Qatar in particular.
Yeah, it's a great assessment of it. Yeah, hugely proud. And again, I wanted to you know, I was trying to speak to men I mean, there's one or two women actually who have big influential positions in the country, but men mainly, about how it felt and the massive journey that Qatar has been on in this like tiny, ridiculously short period of time, from like the 70s to now. You know, when there weren't, you would have, if you'd have gone to Qatar, what, 50 years ago, the shoreline was just empty. There's like one hotel and it was just empty. And you talk about those skyscrapers now, you know, the whole thing is built up and shiny. And during the World Cup, they had all of these like, you know, Godzilla sized pictures of, you know, Luka Modric or Harry Kane or whoever. And so yeah, it was this desire to host the world. Certainly it was a huge thing of pride, but then again, I think generally there's the kind of senior Qataris are quite private and quite worried about speaking about themselves and their dreams, because it's almost like the whole of the Qatar population, as in of Qataris specifically, is involved in like a PR operation. It's like you're signed up to PR Qatar from the moment you're born. So yeah, there was this anxiety, I think, for the older people about saying anything, just in case, you know, it didn't quite sound perfect. And of course, it's not democracy as well. So, you know, if someone takes against what you've said, then you might not have, your family might not have so much influence in future. Interestingly, though, it was amazing. I did manage to speak to some young women who were playing football in the country and were actually Qatari. And they were pretty like, I mean, they didn't really feel as though they could necessarily change much, because even them, you get given a whole lot of money if you're Qatari, depending on the sort of thing you do. So you would get paid, your tuition fees would be paid anywhere else in the world. So lots of people come and study in England or in Wales, all around in the States, and you would get spending money of several £1,000s a year, and you would get flights as often as you wanted to. So yeah, there's huge benefits to being Qatari, and you'd think that would mean, you know, access to education and the money that you have would mean you could do pretty much anything, but of course not really. You know, you can't, that doesn't necessarily mean you can change your country, but they had ambitions, definitely, and lots of them wanted to play football.
Yeah, well, like you were saying earlier, Kate, there is this sort of Project PR Qatar operation going on. There's not a democracy there, and obviously with your documentary Inside the Qatar World Cup, you kind of went underneath, obviously, as the documentary suggests, the kind of PR exercise. And like you said, you spoke to sort of female Qataris who played football. I know you spoke to sort of one of the first Qatari people who came out as being gay, as well as stadium workers and things like that. And I know, you know, you won an award for it, and it was a really great documentary. But I suppose in the build up to making this, and kind of when you were prepping for this, were you weighing up kind of the potential consequences for these people you were speaking to, and yourself? Was it sort of the biggest responsibility you'd undertaken in your sports broadcasting career today?
God, yeah, definitely. But I mean, that's like, you know, looking after your sources is kind of the number one in serious journalism, which, you know, I am mainly a sports presenter. I wouldn't necessarily being a serious journalist wasn't necessarily the main first thing that I was planning to do when I started out doing this. You know, I love going to football and you know, bloody trying to convey the atmosphere and making sure people who are watching the telly are having a good time and get the vibe, basically. But this stuff is so important
beyond football, like you said. This is
that I'd become interested in it, and I was one of the few people in the world who actually had the kind of access. I mean, maybe the only person who had that kind of access that was able to do something like this. Because a lot of the other people who know about all this stuff actually are high, you know, are like still based in Qatar and are paid by Qatar, so it's very difficult to do stuff like this. So yeah, in terms of the sources, I had to be very careful, and you know, in lots of cases the names weren't given, and one or two cases there were like different voices or like so it was something I thought about a lot. And there's a guy I ended up like speaking to the guys who make the Louis Theroux documentaries, just to like sense check a few things around that, just to see, you know, like, I feel nervous about this, like, because I had one friend I wanted to put on tape because I thought he was a really interesting example of a very moderate person based there, not actually Qatari but from the region. And I actually wanted to talk to him about the kind of feeling about having gay fans there. And I just really underestimated like what moderate means in that part of the world, as opposed to, you know, a moderate British person. And he got very upset with me for asking him about, even just asking about it. And so in the end, I didn't use that at all. So it was always about trying to make sure that everyone felt happy with what they had contributed, and that if someone spoke, if they were happy to be traced, and, you know, or were happy to be like public about it, then that was great. And they had the ability to confirm that. And if not, that we either didn't use it or used it very carefully.
Yeah, that's such a added responsibility, and I hope that we do a duty of care to our guests on this podcast. We're not going to cut anything in a way that paints anybody in a negative light or anything like that, or but definitely, like you said, maybe something you don't typically have to consider until you end up passing a certain threshold of kind of stepping away from the game and dealing with real life, which we can.
Although sorry to cut across, although I suppose that is something I'd instinctively been doing up till then, just in a lot more low stakes way. Like, you know, when I speak to somebody, especially a footballer, you know, anyone who's incredibly famous, it's difficult. The reason why, to be honest, doing interviews with very famous footballers is not that interesting, although I'm happy to, is that, you know, it's very, very hard for them to say anything at all, because if they reach a certain threshold of fame, then people will take the interview, anything that they do, and we'll look through it and we'll get the lines out, and we'll maybe not even like quaff them, but anything, you know, you say an aside or you make a joke that could be taken in a difficult way if it's, you know, written out long form and the context is removed. So it's very hard for somebody who's like, whatever, Mbappe levels of fame to ever say anything particularly interesting in a mainstream way. So even with lower, not so famous people, you have to just be, I try and be sensitive. I'm not trying to stitch anyone up ever. I try and be sensitive to trying, you know, the dream about an interview, as you guys know, is like to make the person come across as they are, to give us faithful an account of themselves as possible. Now, it's possible that person might be a prick, and in that case, maybe they'll come across that way too. But, you know, as long as you're like trying to support them and be it creates something interesting and not being sinister about it, then I think you've done what you can.
Yeah, probably, you know, how much more relevant could that be with one of your recent interviews, Dario Serna, for instance, you know, given kind of like his ties to Ukraine and obviously the political kind of situations surrounding that. So yeah, you got to be careful what you say when you're in that type of position. Not even careful what you say. It's just like you said, there's some things it's just not even worth getting into, just because no matter how you say it or what you say, just out of context, it can look bad. for kind of the wrong person reading it. So
the thing people kicked off about that, by the way, was that he said that Mudryk is like, what did he compared him to? Eden Hazard or something? I can't remember. He said Mudryk is going to be like one of the best
thing.
Yeah, like, but he compared him to someone very, very brilliant. I can't remember who it was. Mbappe, someone like Mbappe. He said basically that, and that blew up. Independently of this. So yeah, that wasn't even something I'd been worried about at all, right? But he was then getting a whole load of like people shouting at him for saying these things.
Dario.
You're just worrying about war, but you should have been worrying about
right
how much quality Mudryk's got.
Well, you have these kind of incredible opportunities to, have these conversations with these people, and you kind of, whether or not it's an interview, you do it across all these mediums, radio, TV, writing, podcasting. They're all quite similar, but in their own way, each of them, there is a unique way to approach it, or a way to do it better than otherwise. So how do you kind of juggle all of these plates and then also do such a great job at the same time, given the kind of different approach that you have to take to each one?
Yeah. Oh, bless you. Oh, thank you. They are pretty different in the sense of, so for example, with TV, so I did a couple of years on Sky Sports News where you'd be doing like maybe a 3-minute interview in a live, so each of the hours on Sports News, it's got adverts at 15:15, 2:45, right? So your segment, the most you're ever going to have is about 7 minutes, let's say, if it was someone absolutely massive. And normally you might have someone on for like 3 or 4 minutes. So a lot of that is just about just asking the relevant talking points, but you can't really take it much further than that. And almost if someone's telling you where they've buried the body, you'd still probably have to be like, now, oh yeah, so we're getting to a commercial break. Like there's not really an ability to provide all that much additional insight. So with that's more about like being diligent and recognizing the structure of the format, and also like being in touch with the guys who are behind the cameras, who have they might have booked this guest because they've got a particular line that they want. And so you have to be sensitive to like the work that they've put in. And even if you think, all right, I'd much rather hear about whatever, then okay, fine. You go with the people who are thinking about the broader picture, perhaps. So that's more like, I think of telly as more like a performance, more like a play, more like a performance medium, whereas I think of radio and podcasting as more like a more interrogative, more like conversational. You might learn something completely new. And then in terms of writing, that's more about trying to find out what you think, I reckon. So yeah, it's funny, you can talk and talk and talk on a ramble or wherever, fighting talk sometimes on BBC, and then you still don't have a clue what you think about something, and then you write 600 words or whatever, and you've got right, that's what I think. So that's quite a privilege, really, to get the chance to do that and put it somewhere where people will read.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so cool. You kind of get the opportunities to work on all these different mediums, and to be honest, like you said, they're all also. I mean, everyone's consuming sport in any way they can. So yeah, the more mediums we find you on, the better, quite frankly, because Kai and I, we're following all these different things. But we'll go back to some. I guess we sort of spoke about it a bit at the start of the podcast, but it has been an amazing Premier League season. Maybe not for Tottenham, but it has just in general been a very exciting season. So we've sort of mentioned this already, but we'll just quickly that there is this title race between Arsenal and City. So what I'll ask both of you guys, Kate and Kai, is obviously it's going to be Arsenal City that will win the league. Who do you think it will be and why? I'll quickly just say, I don't want to jinx it, but I do think that Man City are going to do it. I think Arsenal are running out of steam, and I think that the fact Saliba's got injured has exposed a bit of a weakness in that side. No offense to Rob Holding. I just think that City squad is so strong, and Haaland's a robot and all the rest of it, that they will do it. But Kate, I know you don't want Arsenal to win the league, but what do you think is going to happen in the title race?
But on the subject of Rob Holding, though, I would say that we're watching the would have been the Chelsea-Liverpool game, the world's most boring game a few days ago.
The 0-0,
That was unbelievably boring. And it was so boring that we ended up doing a Premier League boy band, and Rob Holding made it. So at least, I mean, there was some debate about Ben White, but we felt like he wasn't quite. He was for like a different target market.
He's more like Ibiza lads holiday or something.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I'm looking at the Arsenal fixtures remaining, and the next game is Southampton, and then of course there's a City game. Chelsea are beatable. I think the Arsenal's run in is easier. So, based purely on this idea of them bottling it, I what does that even mean in the context of a side that are like, no, shouldn't be in this kind of position? I was doing inverted commas there because this shouldn't in my head. But also, as you were saying, Kai, like, you didn't expect this to be happening this season, right? So I don't even think it's possible for Arsenal to be bottlers, except obviously in the context of how far they've got so far.
Yeah, it's silly, isn't it? Really, like,
it's silly.
The same thing was labelled at the Spurs team with Pochettino when a couple of the years. I mean, we had the third in a 2-horse race, which is just classic Spurs. But then the other season with Conte at Chelsea, again, I don't think we even led the league at any point in that season, but we apparently bottled it. So yeah, it's always, I know it's a slightly different situation with Arsenal, which is funny that you have led the league, but still, like you said, it's not really bottling it when
it's not.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's not. You think whose side are we on? But yeah, I'm sorry, it's not. It's an amazing achievement. I'm not here to blow smoke up Arsenal's arse, but it is. However, wherever you end up, but I think the run-in is easier for Arsenal. So you're going to win the league.
Okay, Kai. Before
we
move to the next one, do you agree with Kate or do you agree with me?
I'm gonna agree with Kate because
oh god, so you're more confident now than you were earlier.
Wow. Well, I'd rather crash back down to reality than be a pessimist who kind of wasn't pulling in the right direction when the actual thing comes true. I'd feel like such a kind of bandwagoner at that point. So got to stick behind the boys, thick and thin, and second place isn't the end of the world. We'll be in the Champions League next year, regardless. Hopefully strengthen a little bit, and Pep's time at City, I think he probably not that long ago did sign a bit of an extension, but he wants to win the Champions League. How many heartbreaks can he take in that kind of regard? And if he does get it, is there going to be like any more for him to really feel like he wants to accomplish? So I think City's kind of train will fall off the tracks a little bit when that time comes, inevitably, just as it does with any kind of great manager leaving a club. So if that happens soon enough, then we'll still be there or thereabouts. Otherwise, they might just pull off into the stratosphere with Haaland over the next few years and just be unreachable. So hopefully that's not the case. So I'm going to go with Arsenal.
No one wants that. Yeah, no one wants that.
There you go.
Yeah,
it's going to be close. It's going to be close.
It is an equivalent. To be clear about the run-in thing, it is an equivalent, a semi-equivalent. The teams that you guys are up against, in some cases, very similar. But obviously, if they're trying to win the Champions League, makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think we've got Newcastle away, last game of the season, even perhaps, which isn't going to be an easy one. But hopefully by then it might be wrapped up because City will be distracted by the shiny Champions League or something like that. But let's flip it back to Spurs.
Okay.
Because that'll be a less stressful conversation for me. And speaking on kind of the manager situation, clearly there's a lot of issues around the club in particular, but definitely around the first team right now. So, Kate, how does it get better? Such a big question. How does it get better? And who is the manager to guide the squad through the improvements that are needed?
Oh, I don't want to be this like. I'm not going to start banging on about Pochettino, am I?
I don't know. Are you going to take the bait?
It is so tempting to do that. I've held off so far, but I'm nearly at that point. But
it's so basic. It's like you're not supposed to go back, with relationships. but the relationship was good. Yeah, I think ideally we'd want somebody who was like Pochettino was when he was appointed. It was that in that kind of stage in his career. And maybe I'm just being so basic that I want Pochettino still. But there are lots of like, I don't know. The tricky thing with Pochettino is the relationship between him and Daniel Levy. And I remember when they were leaving, him and Jesus Perez and it was clear that things were winding down, there was this sense that they had done so much for the club, which they had, and they'd done this whole like season and a half without any bloody signings, and in reaction they hadn't been subsequently backed, and then they hadn't really kind of been treated with respect anyway, as in the respect of saying like, okay, we're going to help you, you know, reshape that back line, get in the players, and then getting Jose, getting Conte, the club did spend the money, so it would be hard. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it would be hard to understand how the relationship could be rebuilt between the club, as it were, and Pochettino. But yeah, I don't know. For me, that would be kind of. I don't know if I'm just being super duper basic, but I feel like it would mean a lot if he were to come back, and you sort of still have that belief. Lots of people are talking about Portuguese managers as a kind of rough equivalent. So Ruben Amorim, who won the league with Sporting quite cheaply. Sergio Constance, sorry.
Daniel Levy will love him.
Yeah, well,
he's familiar with Pedro Porro.
But yeah, perfect.
It's fine. Yeah.
But and then there's obviously Sergio Conceição as well. But I think no, to the point about Daniel Levy, like we are trying to compete with
literally
with Saudi Arabia. Like, there is the challenges that he faces are very different to the challenges that a lot of these other clubs face. And so, yeah, I don't get, when there's like press releases about the like F1 collaboration with the stadium,
track,
it's a bit silly, and I can see why it annoys people when they're just like worrying about the league. But equally, like in our case, in Tottenham's case, football actually is trying to be a business, and in quite a lot of other cases, it's not. It's a PR, again, to return to that point about Qatar, it's a PR exercise that can cost whatever you want. So that would be my pushback to the kind of doing things on the cheap idea. However, I think there is something to be said for appointing a kind of manager who's used to doing things in a lean way, and also is like building up a team that works together. I mean, we love that stuff, and clearly a guy like Jose, like Conte, who's done it before and is just expecting to, it hasn't worked. So
you just described Graham Potter in the first part of that sentence, and that didn't work either. Well, not for you guys, but for Chelsea. But
but that challenge is greater.
Fair enough.
Hope, by the way.
Yeah,
it is quite sorry, but it is nice to see Chelsea not compete.
I know. At least that's something we can all kind of find collectively.
Get behind. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Pochettino at the moment, I wouldn't say no to him. I kind of want someone like an Arne Slot or even like a Vincent Kompany to come in, play attacking football, try and get the fans back on side. We're so kind of disjointed as a fan base and a club at the moment. But yeah, I do think there's something to be said for the problems start at the top. Whilst commercially, Levy's done a fantastic job. It's an amazing stadium. We're in a financially solid place. I think some of the on-pitch decisions have really cost us when we were in, as we joked about, but we seriously were in a fantastic position a few years ago. But we shall see. Away from Tottenham, very quickly before we end, there is a top four battle going on, and there's a big relegation battle going on. So these will be quick fire questions. But who do we think? We've sort of talked about the title race. Who's going to make up the top four? Let's just assume City and Arsenal in it. Who's finishing third and fourth? I'll go quickly first. I do think United will do it. And then actually my wild card for fourth is Brighton. I know they lost to us.
Nice. Why not?
Yeah, I just think they got a few games in hand. They play brilliant football. Well, yeah, exactly. Why not? They seem to be great. So Brighton's my kind of spot for fourth. Kai, what do you think?
Top four, United, and I'm going to stick with Newcastle. I fear what might be coming, given the money and the resources that they have going into European football, and but they've done really well. They're a really good team, best defense in the Premier League, I think. Eddie Howe has been extremely impressive, and they have a few Bruno Guimaraes and Isak the striker. They look good. I like Saint Maximin as well.
Yes. I think the top four probably does look right as it is now. I mean, obviously, Newcastle and United have got a game in hand over us, and with 53 points. I like the Brighton idea just to shake things up. I mean, there is a I'm sorry, I was going to start talking about Liverpool, but they're so mad because they win massively and then
they're just
get
odd.
Destroyed. It's just unbelievable. So yeah, I think the most plausible outcome is what you said, Kai, that it stays as it is. And there's loads of stats about this that I can never remember about how, like at a certain point of the season, if you're in fourth, you're going to finish in the top four. And I think we've reached that threshold now. But needless to say, I would prefer it was not the case.
Cool. Okay, and then quickly, we've got a relegation battle as well. So many teams go down. Again, I'll start quickly with the three. I think Southampton are down, sadly.
Down, yeah.
I think Leeds, they've lost 5-1, 6-1 their last two home games. That seems to be a problem for me, so I think they'll go down. And then, even though I'm a bit sad about this, because it's good they've come back in the Premier League, I think Forest are in a bit of a tricky spot as well. And I think all their many signings will have to go and play in the Championship next season. But Kai, what do you think?
Southampton, Leicester just looks so bad, and we'll see if Dean Smith can do anything about that. I'd like to poach a few of their players if they do go down. Maybe like Harvey Barnes and Tielemans and Madison wouldn't be bad. Otherwise, randomly, I'm just looking at the run-in. West Ham, they have a game in hand and they're slightly out of the relegation zone, but they have really tough games, I think, from looking at their run-in. And also, I'm just quite bitter about them having taken a couple of points off. So
I was thinking that, Kai. I was wondering if that was influencing
that crept into my decision making.
So up the Hammers, they've always been my favourite Premier League side, apart from Tottenham, sure. I've just been looking at this like amazing XG table. Okay, I don't know how much you get off on XG, which I don't really, because I don't really understand maths, but it's quite interesting because it shows you like XG of points, like
yeah.
And so the thing is about Leicester is that they're basically, according to this, sorry, it's tiny, they're like 9 points behind where they sort of theoretically should have been, which maybe speaks to them getting out of it because your luck, like they've got just enough time for it to turn. And similarly, West Ham are 11 points behind where they quote unquote should have been. So with that reasoning, I would say Southampton, totally agree, down. Forest, down. And then, look, I'd kind of be interested to see, I mean, I thought this last season, to see Everton go down. Because I've got a lot of pals who are Everton fans, and I feel for them, and I've watched quite a lot of Everton this season, and oh my God. But it almost feels like they need a reboot. Like it might be a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Just that Deitch factor. I know they lost on the weekend to Fulham. I just think he'll keep them up. He just has, some of these managers have this knack of doing it, and he seems to. Well, we'll find out if he does still or not. But it's definitely there's still a lot to play for this season, which is exciting. But I still just want it to end as quickly as possible, if I'm honest. At the same time, and speaking of things ending, that sort of brings us to an end of this podcast today. So on behalf of Kai and myself, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoyed chatting to you. It's been a lot of fun. And for our listeners who are listening to this podcast, how can they best follow you, Kate, and sort of just keep up to date with all the many stuff you're doing at the moment?
Oh yeah. Oh, thanks guys. And thanks so much for having me. This has been great. I am on Twitter and Instagram, so it's at KVL Mason, which are my initials, as you could probably imagine. And then I've got this column in the Metro. So if you ever find yourself on a tube on a Friday and wanna read my ramblings. It's not always on football. I'm just about to start this interesting, really fun new presenting gig actually with Eurosport, which is not football, but I'm going to be the host of the mountain biking coverage the next few seasons. And I'm really psyched about that because it feels like they've got a massively like engaged fan base, and also it's just fun to get out to mountains and like see crazy people do crazy things. So that's over the summer if you happen to have Eurosport or Discovery. And then I do BBC Final Score on Saturdays.
That's always one of those things whenever I'm back in London that kind of brings me full circle nostalgia, is getting on the tube and picking up a copy of the Metro. So I'm going to be extra keeping an eye out for your column, Kate. But thanks again. Sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us on this podcast, and thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you as well. So best of luck with everything that you're up to. For our listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, please do subscribe wherever it is that you listen to your favorite podcasts. Just search for United Mates Football Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Our handle is @UnitedMatesFP. If you feel like putting some faces to these voices, then you can find us on YouTube as well. Just look for United Mates Football Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. Until next time, everyone, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Goodbye.